You're listening to the Gamblin Gauchos, part of the Stake in the Plains Content Network and the Dave Campbell's Republic of Football podcast feed. Just a couple of casino caballeros talking Texas Tech, betting on the Big 12 and beyond. Now, here's Kyle Jacobson and Rob Bro live from the Cardinal Sports Center studio.
Ooh, welcome into the Gamblin Gauchos. I'm Rob Bro. He's Kyle Jacobson. In the Cardinal Sports Center studios, part of the Republic of Football podcast feed. Got a couple of guests today from the Cincy Slangins podcast. I've got Hummer and Coomer, a couple of great names, by the way. A couple of great names as we welcome you guys in. How y'all doing tonight?
Pretty good. It was supposed to be our slogan for our presidential run here in the upcoming presidential election. This is our first time being eligible to make that run. It was going to be Hummer Coomer. That was the platform.
I'd vote.
But now Hummer's jumped on VP, as you can see. So I guess I'm assuming the role of president here eventually. And this is our first, I guess we're launching in the same way other candidates might be launching on a niche Texas Tech podcast.
Yeah.
In May.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
We'll go Twitter Spaces later and do that.
Yeah, this is a first for us. So that's pretty cool. We can add that to the list.
Yeah.
Well, like Rob said, we appreciate y'all joining us. And for our listeners out there, what we're doing this summer is kind of taking a virtual tour of the entire Big 12, especially with new folks like Cincinnati coming in. Just want to give our Texas Tech listeners sort of a sense of the state of other football programs and what your fan base, what your football culture is like, all that good stuff. And I think we'll find we probably have some common ground for better, like on the Mahomes-Kelsey connection, or for worse, like on the Tommy Tuberville connection. I know our fans have questions about your cuisine, and so we'll get into all of it. But first, why don't y'all just go ahead and introduce yourselves, introduce your podcast, and then we'll get into the rest of the conversation.
Well, my name is Zach Coomer. As you alluded to, I go by Coomer on the podcast. We lean into the last names and their similarities. We host the Cincy Slang and Bearcat Sports podcast and have done so since 2019. It actually started as a basketball podcast. So there was a time where you may not have had us on because I'm not even sure you guys cover basketball much. You can let us know whether you do or don't. But we are very much a fan podcast. We do not break a ton of news, but we do share tons of opinions and thoughts on all things Cincinnati Bearcat sports, primarily football and basketball.
We're so bad at breaking news that we had renderings of the new practice facility that we just had spent $140 million to break ground on for like 3 weeks and just sat on them. Didn't do anything with it. We just, enjoyed, kept the joy to ourselves.
Cowardice.
We'll have to get into indoor practice facilities later because Texas Tech has one under construction right now. And funny enough, those renderings leaked on a public Dropbox link that started circulating the message boards and all that. I think just like the day before it was supposed to be publicly released. So it wasn't out there very early. I think we could have technically blasted that out on Twitter and made that even more public than it already was, but a little bit of a snafu there. Rob, I see your name is Fan of Chili. Do we want to just dive right into the Skyline Chili and just get that out of the way early?
Yeah, well, one of the questions in the mailbag later is why do you call your chili sauce, or why do you call your sauce chili, or something to that effect? There's chocolate, there's cinnamon, there's lots of things working there in the Skyline Chili. First of all, what is it?
Well, it's chili.
Okay.
So, alluding to it or referring to it as sauce feels a bit derogatory, feels aggressive.
I said
I know it's one of the listeners. I just want to put that out there. It's very much a Cincinnati chili. I know, people generally do refer to it as Skyline Chili. That is a brand in Cincinnati, and it's the strongest brand, the most notable. They just signed a deal with the Bengals. The Clifton location, the one that I live closest to, in my opinion, is the best. So when you do come to Cincinnati for a road game eventually, make sure you stop at Ludlow and Clifton for a 5-way and a couple cheese conies, whatever floats your boat. But essentially it's spaghetti, chili, cheese, or onions and beans. You can throw a few things on there. It's a delicious meal. It's perfect at 12 p.m., 3 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 3 a.m. You can eat it whenever. It always hits the spot.
It hits the spot so well that somehow in 2013, the Smithsonian listed it as one of the 20 most iconic food destinations in America. It seems to be very polarizing. So I live in New York City now. I lived in Philly for a few years, so I don't live in the Cincinnati area anymore. And when people bring it up to me outside of Cincinnati, it's very polarizing. They can't decide whether they want to punch me in the face or do they actually want to try it. And it seems that they lean towards the latter. I introduce everybody to it a different way. I actually don't introduce them to the chili with the spaghetti. We have a dip where you take Philadelphia cream cheese, add a can of the sauce of the chili, sprinkle a little cheese on there, a little bit of Tabasco sauce, throw it in the oven, melt the cheese, and just dig right in with your tortilla chips. It is the best way to ease your way in to Skyline chili and really getting to hone those flavors, that chocolate, that cinnamon.
I can get down with the dip, I think.
You would. I think you can get down with the whole thing. You just got to be open-minded and lean into it. Go for it. It's a great hangover cure. It's and like Hummer said, Super Bowl parties, quick meals. And the thing about Skyline, like if you go to Japan and get a bowl of ramen, they have the bowl of ramen to you within 5 minutes. Like you order, it comes to you, you slurp it up, you leave. That's Cincinnati chili. You walk into any chili parlor, but particularly Skyline, and you're going to have your food quickly. It comes out, scarf it down, get on with your day.
Hey, we've got the first UCF Cincinnati agreement maybe here right in the chat line. As a UCF fan, I'll be the first to admit that the chili is amazing. The Skyline is opening up 25 minutes from the UCF campus. Let's go.
Wow.
Spreads.
All right. That was going to be one of my facts, is that Florida is a state in which there are locations of Skyline chili. My uncle was recently, he saw it on sale. I don't know if it was what grocery store, but he bought, I want to say close to 40 cans. He bought the entire place out, the store in his house. I was like, good. But I hope that's the last thing that us and UCF ever agree on.
Yeah,
They got a shot in here.
Yeah, he's taking a shot at the history, and I want to get into some of that too. But I've been pleasantly surprised. You know, I was worried with Texas and Oklahoma's departure and the newcomers making their way to the Big 12 that some of the rivalries would feel a little bit contrived and, secondary. But Cincinnati, UCF, that is sincere. It's raw. And I love how much y'all's fans argue on Twitter. And I think that's a super underrated rivalry coming into the new Big 12.
Yeah,
I got some strong feelings on this because I hear some of the fan base and, in our dark corners of whether you want to call it Twitter, Discords, message boards, they're talking about, oh, let's kick UCF out of the Big 12 and bring someone else. I'm like, no, I love the rivalry. I love that we have kind of genuinely built a hatred of one another that's not friendly, right? Well, yeah, you come to Cincinnati, we're going to treat you with respect. We're nice people, but generally I hate your school, right? I hate everything that UCF stands for. I hate Taco Fall, right? I really do not like that man as a basketball player. I thought he was super overrated. The only thing he was good for was making you have to adjust your shot. Other than that, he was useless on a basketball court. I do not agree with that. They set in motion the Cincinnati run to the playoff. I think it's absurd. What do you call proclamation? It's awful, but I genuinely enjoy the rivalry. I genuinely enjoy that I hate playing them, and I genuinely enjoy that they hate playing us too.
Their fans are weird on Twitter. Okay, they're just weird. They're weirdos. Their behavior is inexplicable. I remember during Des Ritter's senior season, frankly, the last 2 to 3 years of Des Ritter's career, they were like stalkers. They couldn't stop thinking about him, tweeting about him, every throw, every attempt. And the hilarious part was he always won. He just kept winning. He just kept winning football games, proving them wrong, and went down as one of the 5 winningest quarterbacks in college football history. So I appreciate and love the fact that they have to live with that for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, and I think it makes for a good rivalry when things are relatively balanced. And so I hope this doesn't offend what I'm about to say, but like you're both coming into the Big 12 at the same time. I think the recent success has been comparable, and we could argue and split hairs. I know that they have feelings about their 2018 season that maybe aren't shared by anybody who's not a UCF fan. But both programs have appeared in New Year's Six games recently. I think the head-to-head is pretty balanced, if I recall correctly. And it seems like from a program resource standpoint, they're on roughly comparable footing. And that's why I think the next decade or so of them going head-to-head in the Big 12 should be pretty intriguing. And then you add in that, like Hummer was saying, the fan base resentment toward each other, within the confines of the game at least. I think it makes for a great storyline and great rivalry in the Big 12. So I'm looking forward to it.
Genuinely good rivalry, and you've got two schools that both hired former Auburn football coaches that will inevitably turn out to be disasters. Ours has happened already. Theirs is in process.
Yeah, we're familiar with him. I guess that's a great segue. We'll go there. So just for some personal context, I arrived at Texas Tech in 2012, and the football team was pretty mediocre at that time. I think they went 7-5 that season, nothing remarkable. And before the bowl game, I get word that our head football coach was at a restaurant taking a recruit to dinner, and he left and crawled out of the bathroom window to take the job at Cincinnati. Now, that version might be a little bit embellished, but he did get up mid-meal and decide to, at the time, I thought was kind of, and again, I hope this doesn't offend, he's leaving a Power 5 job to go to a Group of 5 job. It was a little bit offensive to us. We're like, oh, that feels like a demotion, even though Cincinnati was winning more games at the time for sure. So he's not very well liked around here. And then he goes to Cincinnati and kind of does what he does. And now I think most of y'all's fans probably don't care for him either. So, yeah, tell us kind of your perspective on Tommy Tuberville, and maybe Rob and I can give you some of ours.
I remember when they were announcing that hire, I kind of had the opposite feeling that you had. I was like, oh my God, we're poaching a coach from the Power 5 or whatever was being called back then. Like oh my God, a former national championship. I really didn't know too much about him, to be honest. I wasn't sitting there, watching every Auburn game. I wasn't watching Ole Miss. I wasn't, and not really Texas Tech. So I was just pumped, right? So yeah, I was pumped at first, and that quickly faded.
At first is a good description of Tommy Tuberville. Yeah.
Yeah, it broke the mold of what we had been doing for the past few coaches, right? We hired, you got Brian Kelly coming from from a MAC school. You had Butch Jones. It just broke our minds and got people more excited. Had way more national buzz. Had Cincinnati being talked about in a much different way. The man was checked out nearly from the get-go. You couldn't tell right away. His first season wasn't an abject disaster, but recruiting was
not existent. He started doing car commercials, right? That's when we knew, like, oh, he's here for his retirement gig. He's out here doing McCluskey right. Chevrolet.
It was a golden parachute.
Yeah, I think that's partly why he was eager to leave Texas Tech was he had just completed year 3. All 3 seasons, and in totality, like I said, it was mediocre, and he wasn't going to get a contract extension. He didn't want to get fired, so he takes a brand new contract, extends that paycheck for another 4 or 5 years. And yeah, it's really kind of frustrating as a fan. Like you're so passionate about it. I know y'all care deeply for your alma mater, and Rob and I care deeply about Texas Tech. So to have somebody who's cashing checks and doesn't really care is super frustrating. He did win 9 games each of his first 2 years, and so I feel like it wasn't terrible. But after that, it just kind of fell off a cliff. And I'm sure y'all remember this moment, but when it really felt like it was over was that clip of him walking into the tunnel and yelling at one of y'all's fans to go get a job. It's like, okay, it might be over for you here, man.
Go to hell. Get a job. That was it. Put a fork in him.
Yeah, that was a natural exposure for Cincinnati too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like we got a little lucky to survive the Tuberville era because, I mean, Cincinnati football going back prior to Brian Kelly, it's not rooted in crazy amounts of history of success, right? We had Rick Minter, who was okay shepherding us through Conference USA. Then we had we started getting some early success, and we bring on Brian Kelly, and he just blows it out of the water. And that's when Coomer and I that's when we attended the University of Cincinnati, was during that transition period. So that's what we kind of grew up with in terms of being students and fans, is witnessing us go to the Orange Bowl and sitting in the student section front row and storming the field and throwing oranges and then Coomer I don't think went with us, but I went up to Pittsburgh for the de facto Big East championship game, and getting to talk all the smack to the Pittsburgh fans. Who Pitt fans, by the way, are the worst. Anybody in Pittsburgh who's a fan of any Pittsburgh team is by far the worst fan. Maybe second only to Ohio State. People can fact check me on that, but I'm pretty sure there's probably a Wikipedia entry there somewhere. But that's what we grew up in. And so Tommy Tuberville, with kind of what he did to the program, leaving this in the state that he did, we went back to what we were used to, which is getting a smaller coach, getting someone who is still working their way up with Luke Fickell. And I think we obviously hit a home run with what Luke Fickell did. But yeah, Tommy Tuberville, I think there's maybe one person, I'm not going to mention their name, who's a fan of Tommy Tuberville still.
Well, by all accounts, Tommy Tuberville is very fun to go to a bar with. He's very fun to have a beer with. Just kind of a guy who you can easily understand how he would meet with an AD, meet with the president of the university. Everybody would like him. I mean, look, the guy's a senator now. He's got the political chops in terms of schmoozing and swindling his way into jobs he should not have. And Cincinnati was an example of that, and just very clearly checked out, lack of effort, and it played out the last couple seasons.
Yeah, he's pretty good at that age bracket.
Yeah. And just the circumstances that he got hired at Texas Tech, he was unemployed at the time, and Texas Tech is coming off its best decade in program history right after Mike Leach is fired. I feel like it's a pretty good job to walk into at that point in time. And like y'all said, he kind of mails it in for 3 years, leaves, and then has the gall to talk bad about Lubbock and Texas Tech and our fans. It's like, dude, we gave you, I don't know, $9 or $10 million to pretty much sit there and do nothing. And then he compared Lubbock to Iraq, publicly. And then when he was commentating games with ESPN, he was calling a Texas Tech game the season right after that. So he had to apologize, and all of our fans were pissed. We're like, we don't want Tuberville doing the color commentary on this game. It was a disaster.
Is he the worst coach in the history of Texas Tech football?
No.
He's not the worst, but is he the most despised?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that either, because Matt Wells is pretty maybe respect and is two different things. People just
I think people at least acknowledge that Matt Wells was a nice guy.
Yeah.
The on-field results were worse under Wells than Tuberville, but people just don't like Tuberville the person. And then in between those two coaches, who on the field wasn't very good, was Cliff Kingsbury, also pretty mediocre, but beloved here because he played quarterback and set all kinds of records with Mike Leach. So, yeah, we've had, until Joey McGuire, who made his debut last year, we've kind of had 3 coaches in a row that struggled. And, yeah, Cliff is probably the only one with a favorability rating that's above water right now with the fan base, I'd say. So, yeah, it's been a rough kind of 10 or 15 years since the Leach firing. But
most coaches leaving your program is going to upset a fan base. Either they get fired because they did a horrible job and they're upset about the product, or they leave the program, like we've experienced a couple times where Brian Kelly goes to Notre Dame. You've got Luke Fickell now going to Wisconsin. That's irked people, and you certainly see the negativity. But over time, you look back on it and say that was a hell of a ride. Those were a hell of a few years. That guy was incredible at coaching football. There's no looking back on the Tuberville era with anything but just pure cynicism and hate.
You say that, but didn't we just boo Brian Kelly when he came back to celebrate
a loving boo?
Yeah. And this is something y'all's recent run with head coaches, I think, is actually really impressive. And so within the remaining 8 teams in the Big 12, I think some are very excited about the additions. Some have an opinion and mindset toward it that I totally disagree with. They like really look down their nose at anybody that used to be Group of 5 and like can't believe we're adding these schools. And I don't think that's the right mentality to have. And like I've seen Texas Tech fans look down their nose at Cincinnati's program. And I'm like, guys, they've had 4 coaches in a row win at least 9 games. 3 of those 4 coaches have won 10 or more games. And to me, that's a mark of a good program. Like if it's one coach who has a good run at a school, that's one thing. But if coach after coach can find success, to me, that shows that like the infrastructure is there with the program and they can sustain success long term. And so, especially the last 5 years with Cincinnati under Fickle, I think 3 11-win seasons and then 9-1 during COVID. And so they probably would have won 10, 11, 12 in a full season. I think Cincinnati, maybe right up there with BYU, kind of has the historical aspect under their belt in terms of demonstrating that they're able to sustain success long term.
Appreciate that. Appreciate the feedback. I think that if this transition to the Big 12 has revealed anything, it's that people are kind of you have your experience in your conference in that region. And even when you guys put out the tweet advertising this podcast and what we would talk about, I looked at it and it was like Tommy Tuberville, Dana Beers, and Skyline Chili. And I'm like, oh, this is a look into what Cincinnati is potentially known for right now, at least on the internet.
And what are we going to talk about Dana Beers?
Right. But he, that is something that buzzes and gets popularity and gets traction. But yeah, we do like to think that there's an infrastructure here that does allow coaches to succeed. I think that is very much a reason that Satterfield left the Louisville job for Cincinnati, knowing that there's a much more, he looked at it as a more stable opportunity, an opportunity where they are investing hundreds of millions of dollars in an indoor practice facility. They're transitioning to the Big 12. They're going to be more financially healthy than they've ever been in their history with this transition, and seeing that as an opportunity to build something special. Now, a cynic would say he's leaving Louisville because he's 1 year away from getting fired. But I do think that there's real things that Satterfield can point to in terms of high school football talent in this region. It's rich. You saw Luke Fickle capitalize on the recruiting pipeline in this area, and the recent track record of success, financial investments, and all those things add up to a place that you can really succeed in a big way in college football.
You've mentioned a coaching transition a couple of times. How do you feel that coaching transition is going to work, going from conference to conference, coaching transition? You've had a couple of seamless ones, but do you think you can have another and capitalize on the success, even with so many draft picks over the last couple of years leaving the program?
I think the biggest thing to keep in mind with the transition is, we have Ohio State in our backyard, but they've transitioned their recruiting to a more national recruiting. And that's what's kind of left that void open for the coaches to come in during this transition period. And Luke Fickle, I would say this is still a transition. He took us to this first year of going into the Big 12. He's left, but he has sown the seeds of UC is now a household name in these local high schools. So with Satterfield bringing on, and we have a nice size coaching pool. I can't remember if it was top 20 or top 10 in terms of our assistant coaching pool that we just gave him with his contract. It's like $7 million, hired a GM for recruiting. So they're going out and having dedicated people working the local area. And they're also working it on a much wider aspect as well. So I think it puts us in a very good situation to succeed right off the bat. I think the other thing that we have going for us is there is instability in, what we're hearing with rumors of the ACC, right? And we have Louisville down to the south who could also be capitalizing on this, but that's a negative for them. Kentucky is just Kentucky. I don't ever see a world where Kentucky is going to be a powerhouse in football, no matter how hard they try. That's just my personal opinion on that. So really the only big school that I think we're competing with in a really large way for the top Ohio talent in a local sense is Ohio State. And they're not focusing on it right now. They're going out to California. They're going out to Florida. They're going everywhere almost accept the backyard. It used to be if you were a top high school football player in Ohio, you were going to Ohio State, and that's no longer the case anymore.
However, our over-under is set at 4.5. And so realistically,
I'm taking the over on that, right?
I definitely taking the over. I would say realistically, though, there's growing pains that we're going to experience. You would experience it naturally if you were bringing a team that had people like Des Ridder, Sauce Gardner, Kobe Bryant, like a top 5 type team. You would experience growing pains in a situation like that, in my opinion, just with the week to week grind of playing better competition and not traveling to Greenville to play East Carolina or getting that break against Tulsa. I mean, it's just a different beast we're heading into. And then when you also factor in, okay, coaching change, entirely new coaching staff, a lot of new guys on the roster, a lot of roster transition, new conference. I think it's natural to expect and pump the brakes on expectations in year one. I think a great outcome for us would be bowl qualifying year one. That's, I think, the goal here, to see if we can accomplish it. And that would be, to me, a success.
That's another brilliant segue to something I wanted to talk about, was just kind of roster talent at Cincinnati. Before we get there, we should have warned you about this. We're a very corporate podcast. We have like 4 ad reads to get through. So I'm going to get to one right now. We talked about Skyline Chili, but when y'all come to Lubbock, whenever that is, we need to take y'all to a barbecue joint called Rahino Barbecue, because it's the best in West Texas. I don't know what the barbecue scene is like in Ohio. I'm not going to cast aspersions against it because I'm not advised. But Rahino has everything. They've got ribs, brisket, turkey, jalapeno sausage, brisket burgers, everything. So we need to get y'all out there. We'll get there early because the lines are long. We'll order ahead at RahinoBBQ.com. And if y'all want to sneak peek, y'all can give them a follow on social at RahinoBBQ. I don't know if it's better than Skyline Chili.
What are the – nothing is. What are the sides like?
Oh, they've got green chili, cream corn.
Yep.
Mac
salad, potato salad.
They've got a bunch of dessert options now too. Like they've got cobbler sometimes. They have a really big menu and actually like kind of rotate stuff in and out. So there's usually something new to try every time you go. It really is good. I know we're paid to say it, but it's good.
Texas barbecue goes hard. I told you guys before the podcast, for people listening, I lived there for about 6.5 years in Austin, Texas. So a little bit of a different setting, but
yeah,
regardless, lots of good barbecue in that area.
Yeah, there's a ton in the Austin Hill Country area too, for sure. Okay, talent at the University of Cincinnati. I was listening to one of y'all's recent podcasts, and y'all had a really good tidbit that I think might surprise some people. It surprised me. Y'all said of members in the new Big 12 or the remaining Big 12, Cincinnati has had more draft picks over the last few years than all of them except Oklahoma, and the difference is only one player. So basically, y'all are neck and neck with Oklahoma in terms of getting guys from college to the pros during kind of the latter half of the Luke Fickell era. From last season's squad, as I understand it, you're losing your quarterback, your leading rusher, and your 2 leading receivers. So let's start on offense. Who are some names to watch, or kind of what's the plan in terms of replacing that skill position production? And then maybe we can talk trenches and defensive side of the ball after that.
To start, there is a bit of a dearth of talent offensively. I would say the wide receiver position is where we have the most obvious holes to fill. There's some big time names floating around in the portal. One of them is attached to Cincinnati right now. I hope that comes to fruition. But that is definitely the position that I think we are going to need to upgrade fast. In terms of how we replace and how we replenish, the offense is going to look a lot different next year. Ben Bryant was the quarterback last year, and the offense was stretching the field vertically to Tyler Scott, to Trey Tucker. It also featured one NFL tight end, Josh Wiley. Leonard Taylor is also on a roster, trying to make a roster, I should say. So skill position wise, this team was kind of stacked, and Ben Bryant, solid overall, a very polarizing quarterback in Cincinnati. He's being replaced by Emory Jones, a transfer from Arizona State via Florida, who has lots of talent, is a tantalizing figure, but I don't know that he's necessarily ever put it together for one incredible season, but the physical tools are all there. He looks the part in the spring game. It was a sure thing. This is a guy that Satterfield brought in himself. So when Ben Bryant shortly after the spring game enters the transfer portal, nobody is that shocked because Satterfield's going to play his guy. And so Bryant ends up at Northwestern. So quarterback position filled, offensive line. It's going to be a running team this year. And I know that we're looking at filling in the pipeline on in terms of wide receivers, but there is going to be less skill there than there has been historically. Satterfield does like running the ball based on what we've learned about him so far. And so, yeah, I think you're going to look at like a running back by committee type vibe with the team. You've got Ethan Wright, one of my favorites. I'm not sure he's going to be the main running back by any account, but he's a hard runner. I love his speed. I love his aggression. He was a running back 2 seasons ago, moved to safety, back at running back this season. Corey Kiner, a local running back out of Cincinnati who had just video game numbers in high school, went to LSU for a season and then came back home to Cincinnati. Second season now playing for the Bearcats. I think it'll look a lot better year here under Satterfield. And then we've got Ryan Montgomery, who's more of like a shifty back. Not necessarily, it's not top speed fast, but he's just shifty and quick, gets into holes. And so to me, it's going to be a lot of running and a lot of short passing game until we actually see it replenished in the wide receiver ranks.
How about defensively? You lose a really good linebacker, some other skill positions there defensively. Is it kind of the same rebuild look over there?
Less so because of what the defensive line looks like. You have Dante, the Godfather Corleone, who graded out as I think the best defensive tackle in college football last season. And that was as a freshman. He's going to clog the lane and be a run stopper for us. We're bringing back Malik Van, who's got to be like 23 at this point, 24. He's got a lot of experience. Suffered an injury early in his senior year last season, so he's bringing it back for one more year this year. But yeah, I think the defensive front's going to be pretty solid, and I feel more confident in that unit. Deshaun Pace, who's actually Ivan Pace's brother, is an outstanding player. Plays a very different style of football than Ivan Pace. Can actually make a lot of plays in the secondary, sort of as like a hybrid linebacker type safety. Slash safety, but reviews out of him out of spring brawl are great. He's going to be a difference maker in the Big 12. So yeah, I think defensively it's actually going to look better. The defensive coordinator Satterfield brought is very good, very aggressive, likes getting after the quarterback, and I think that matches well with the type of players we've got on that side of the ball.
Yeah, that style of play fits in the Big 12 as well.
So the Big 12 schedule is a little bit unusual for us because we've gotten really accustomed to just playing a full round robin, and you don't really have to wonder who's on your schedule. But because of how it is now, there's a few teams that you don't get to play. Do y'all know off the top of your head, do y'all play West Virginia and Kansas State this year?
We definitely are playing West Virginia, and I believe we are playing Kansas State too.
Yeah,
Okay.
we play Kansas State. I don't think we play Kansas State. We play Kansas and we play West Virginia.
Okay.
And then so it starts off a juggernaut of Eastern Kentucky. Then we go to my favorite place because we own whatever Heinz Field is called now, Pitt. And then God, if Satterfield loses to Miami for the first time in like 16 years, you're going to see Bearcat Twitter just like
can't happen.
Yeah, it can't happen. It'll literally be like fire him the next day. It's like he's gone. Then we start Big 12 play: Oklahoma, BYU, Iowa State, Baylor, Oklahoma State, UCF, Houston, West Virginia, Kansas.
Okay. And the reason I was curious, Kansas State and West Virginia both have All-American caliber interior linemen. So when you told me you had a stud at defensive tackle, that would have been a fun matchup. You'll get Zach Frazier against West Virginia in the last game of the season. So for football junkies or guys who like to watch what's going on in the trenches, that should be a really fun matchup, I would think.
I want Big 12 fans. I want fans to get to know Corleone though. Like if there's a name to remember, I want you to remember this name just based on Cincinnati's track record of producing not only draft picks, but when we do get guys drafted, they always turn into top 5 NFL pros, right? You got Jason Kelsey, Travis Kelsey, Sauce
That's just
Gardner.
how it works, right?
It's just how it works. When guys get drafted, they just miraculously turn into top 5 pros.
Tony Pike.
All right, don't fact check me. But Corleone is the next in line for projecting to be one of those top flight NFL players.
Okay, I love it. So for the longest time, Texas Tech had guys that weighed about 220 lining up at defensive end, and we finally have like legit dudes on the defensive line, including a pair of super senior defensive tackles. Their names are Jalen Hutchings and Tony Bradford. I know we don't have Cincinnati on the schedule this year, but if y'all want to check out any Texas Tech football, I think they're both up there in terms of 2 of the best interior defensive linemen in the conference with the Godfather. And so we'll be following the Godfather if y'all want to follow our duo, but they're pretty special. And like I said, they're super seniors. So this will be our last 12 or 13 or hopefully more games with them. And we appreciate defensive line play on this podcast.
We've got a term for guys like Corleone, fathlete.
Fathletes, yes.
6'2", 320, he's a fathlete.
6'2", yeah.
This is probably what I'm looking forward to most about being in the Big 12 is caring about the other conference members' football games. It is not fun to watch Tulsa v. East Carolina. Right? Yeah. It's not fun watching two schools play, whether they're doing good or not, in empty football stadiums. Yeah, so
it's not fun playing them. I got to be honest.
Yeah.
When we're trying to pursue those undefeated seasons, there's so little upside in that kind of game. Like really, you're going into it. If your team doesn't absolutely demolish them and play, perfect 63-7 football, it felt like a loss. It felt like, you're coming out of there with your head in your hands, and it shouldn't feel like that. Really, you just want to be able to watch games and say, did we win or not? And in the Big 12, I feel like we can get back to just watching games, rooting for wins, rooting for good play, and seeing good competition again.
Absolutely. Let's talk facilities. Y'all mentioned you'll have funding for an indoor practice facility. Nippert Stadium is truly historic, both in the Big 12 and just maybe in college football in general. I want you all to talk about your home field advantage and Nippert Stadium and maybe a little bit on the IPF. And Rob, when they're done describing Nippert, I think I have a good Big 12 comp for it. And I want your thoughts on it. And maybe you've got a Big 12 comp based on what they describe. But I'll let y'all have the floor to kind of tell us a little bit about what a home game at Cincinnati is like.
Well, starting in 1895, we're not going to go that far. It is an old stadium. I guess this year will be its official 100-year, or 2024 will be the 100-year anniversary of actually having the concrete structure finished, having concrete stands. It's dedicated after James Gamble Nippert, the money donated by Procter's and Gamble. If you guys want a little corporate history, that's Procter and Gamble's headquartered in Cincinnati. But the atmosphere at Nippert Stadium, if you guys are going to come and visit, Nip at night, it is magical. But what makes it so unique is that not only is the football stadium old, it's smack dab in the middle of campus. There are no parking lots that surround it. So people have to march into the stadium. They have to do a walk. Tailgates are just kind of like we tailgate on campus where you get a permit. You can't drive your car. People are just lugging their coolers. They set up their tents and they have their sign spots. We do have some people who bring in, they're able to drive in their tailgate, what do you want to call them, trailers. I know one of our buddies down there has a bus where they've cut off the back of the bus. So it's a convertible bus, and they've installed, like sleeper sofas in it with, fridges and keg coolers in there. But that's probably one of the most unique things, that there are no parking lots near it. It's right in the middle of campus. And when there's not a football game there, students are allowed to access the field. So you'll see students in there playing tag football. kickball. And then in the winter, when it snows, you always get a snow penis. So that's always fun.
Yeah. Right at the 50 or?
Oh yeah.
Sometimes, it's a nice 100-yard penis.
Oh, all the way. Oh,
Oh yeah.
I got you. I thought we were erecting like a snowman.
More length, less girth.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, but because the campus is urban, the way the sound bounces off it has a hard time escaping. So it gets really loud. The renovations to the stadium, it was I forget what year they were actually completed, like 2016ish, I think. Someone correct me on that, but they added a giant new press box. We're shaking his head like that's not when it was.
No, I'm saying I'm not going to correct it. Like, just keep it rolling.
When was it? 2014. I was 3 years off. I haven't lived there in a while. Either way, they did a really nice job with the renovating, adding luxury boxes, luxury seating. I don't know if you guys sell beer at Texas Tech. Okay, so you guys are normal too. We sell beer also. So, and honestly, I just can't really else to describe it except it's really intimate. Because it's an older stadium, it's super small. There's not a lot of seat backs. It's a lot of benches, and honestly, it's one of my favorite places to catch a football game. But like I said, the fans are super nice, unless you're from South Florida or Central Florida. South Florida is a little nicer. I don't know if you guys have been down there. Tampa's a much nicer area than Orlando.
It's smaller. I think if people are going to knock the stadium, it gets knocked for the size. But frankly, I just love watching football games there. It kind of dips and concaves into the campus essentially, and you've got these cool, contemporary structures surrounding it. It's an urban campus, and so everything kind of feels packed in on itself in a good way. Very walkable. But yeah, man, Nip at night is where it's at. So if you are going to catch a Cincinnati game, you want to be playing the Bearcats at night, get that experience.
For sure. And I think, again, with some of the existing Big 12 fan bases that are skeptical about some of the additions, most Big 12 schools, besides Texas and OU, are 50 to 60,000 seat stadiums. I think West Virginia, Iowa State, and Tech are all right there at 60. I think BYU is maybe 63, 64. They'll have the biggest in the new Big 12. And then at the bottom end, I think Houston, Baylor are both kind of right at that 40,000. But to me, it's more about the feel of the stadium. Like, I've been in Darrell K. Royal in Austin. There's 95,000 people, and there's not like a ton of energy in there. And so I know if there's 42,000, like at an overcapacity crowd at Nippert, and like you're all saying, the campus buildings surround it, that can be an insane atmosphere. And the clip I remember was the 2014 season. Teddy Bridgewater and Louisville are playing at Nippert, and they're like going through warm-ups or whatever. And I guess Bridgewater had played there enough times, he kind of like knew the school songs, the tradition, all that. And so he's like mimicking what the students are doing. And y'all probably know what I'm talking about, but they're doing some kind of like roll thing, and then they lean and then they clap or whatever. And Bridgewater's like doing that while he's stretching on the field with the student section right behind him. And it felt like the crowd was like right on top of the playing surface. And there's a stadium very well known for that in the Big 12. Rob, you know where I'm going with this?
Stillwater.
Yes. I think I haven't been to either for a football game, but I want to go to Nippert and I want to go to Boone Pickens. And I think the feel would be very similar because theirs is also kind of surrounded by some other buildings. And theirs, I think, is more like 55, 60,000. But as far as having the crowd right on top of the sidelines and everything, I think that they're pretty comparable.
Yeah, and I don't know the stadiums as well as you in the Big 12, but I do recall watching some Oklahoma State football games and just thinking that their crowd was particularly special. Like, it just seemed loud and raucous there. And usually it would be tuning in for like, an Oklahoma State game, right? That's what I'm typically watching. And so the environment would be special there. But that's an interesting comp. I'll have to check that out to see if it reminds me of home. But yeah, I think Nippert is a special stadium. I think when you attend it in person, you get it quickly, and it's been rocking pretty hard here recently with how good the teams have been.
That's the other thing that kind of makes it special, because we talk about the Tuberville area, and if you go to a lot of UC, talk to a lot of UC fans, basketball used to rule Cincinnati. Like if you were to ask people born, but prior to 2006, they would probably say they remember Cincinnati as a basketball school. Like UC football was not on the radar. Bob Huggins was god of campus, and that was really it. They could have cared less that football even existed. Most people, they started getting good, and now there's a whole generation of fans that haven't known UC basketball to be the powerhouse that it traditionally has been, and so they only know UC football as being decent, good, great, right, in reaching the heights that it has. And so prior to 2006, I remember being a freshman in college or maybe a senior in high school, but we were playing South Florida, and there was like 3,000 fans in the stadium. It was an absolute joke. And we had the Thursday night ESPN game. They actually put caution tape in the student section to cram us in there so they could do a crowd take, to make it look like there were people there at times. And but those days seem to be behind us, because even with the sparse crowds that Tuberville, would draw towards the end of his tenure, it was still not that terrible. wasn't and I'm gonna throw some shade at Houston, because even when they're quote unquote projected to win the American Athletic Conference, they still draw horrible crowds. That's one school where I'm like, all right, basketball got you to the Big 12.
Well, yeah, basketball and money, maybe.
Yeah, money. But yeah, nip at night, turn the lights off. Just, it's loud. People have been drinking all day. It's rowdy. And then afterwards, head up to Short Vine, go bar hopping. There's plenty of action around the city. Head down into the downtown area. There's a good entertainment district, and over the OT, they call it OTR, over the Rhine. Good bars, good restaurant scene. And then depending on the time of year, maybe you stay in town, you catch a Bengals game on Sunday.
Yeah, Bengals Chiefs maybe.
Ooh, last game of the season.
Yeah.
What's the mayor of Cincinnati's name?
They have a mayor.
It's Patrick Mahomes. Yeah.
No, I think the game day experience you described sounds very Big 12. The one thing that we hate in this conference are 11 a.m. kickoffs, because it does put a damper on some of the tailgating activities. But as long as you're 2:30 or later, you let people tailgate on campus. I feel like the tailgate scenes across most Big 12 schools are pretty good. And if you have time after the game, you hit up the bars. And you mentioned Houston. I won't go down that path. There's a lot I could say about Houston. But it's good to look at Cincinnati's attendance and go, okay, they have 40,000. Even when you're playing Navy and USF and Tulsa, and then you look at Houston and they're playing like Kansas, which I know they're Kansas, but it's a Power 5 school and it's like 17,000 or whatever. And so I'm glad that Cincinnati has a passionate fan base and that y'all are going to bring that to the Big 12. I think it'll make for some really good football environments there moving forward.
Yeah, I think Hummer nailed it when he said that the mantra of UC, or the driving force at UC, was basketball for as long as I grew up. That's what hooked me on Bearcat sports. And now I look at the kids who are going to school now and what moves the needle for them. And if you say they put up those, we have a buddy, Neil Slayton, in Bearcat Twitter, that puts out these polls, and they're all meant to just get everybody riled up and generally end up like 51-49. But he put up the poll, would you rather have, I think, a football championship or a basketball championship? And in my head, I'm thinking that's like a 75-25 basketball poll, just based on what I think about the University of Cincinnati, and football won that poll. And it just showed me how things have shifted here over the last 2 decades in terms of the performance of the football program, but also what Luke Fickell accomplished over the last 5 years with the program. I mean, the runs he went on just were incredible and have really cemented what I think will be a sustainable football culture here moving forward.
Rob, I think that's all I have. Do you want to go into the mailbag a little bit?
Let's do it. You want to tell them about our friends at BHW first?
Yes. Yeah. If y'all get into trouble tailgating and maybe have a little too much fun, you can call our friends over at Barnett, Howard, and Williams Law Firm. These guys are sharp. So there's 3 partners. One is named Barnett. One is Howard. One is Williams.
Is it Barnett from Love is Blind?
I don't think
No,
so.
different Barnett. Okay.
But they're sharp because all three of them graduated from Texas Tech twice, undergrad and law degree. BHWlawfirm.com, they handle all sorts of cases, and maybe they can get our friends in Cincinnati out of some trouble if they get into trouble tailgating in Lubbock someday. Apologies in advance for the mailbag questions. They tend to go off the rails very quickly, so some of these are going to be really stupid questions. You can answer them however you want.
All right, this is the Diversified Lenders mailbag. Who, aside from West Virginia, is going to be their rival in the Big 12?
Ooh, well, I mean, we definitely covered that UCF will be a rival. That's already set in stone. Honestly, other than that, I think it's hard to say, right? We haven't really started playing teams. We haven't really had a chance to see what's going to get under each other's skins when we play each other, and what kind of nonsense we're going to say to each other. But right off the bat, Iowa State fans seem to be obnoxious. I just don't really care for Iowa
Larry.
State
Obnoxious. I thought I thought they were like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And when Iowa State was piling on Central Florida, I just looked at that as being simpatico and potentially being maybe a little more friendly with them. Although for some reason, I do have it in my head too, that Iowa State, for some reason, just could end up being a rival. I don't know. You could tell me if you think there's any similarities between schools, regions, whatever the case may be. But I think Central Florida, West Virginia are the shoe-ins, where it's very clear cut. These are going to be two. They'll turn into pretty legit rivalries. Central Florida is obviously already there. Maybe I think Iowa State's a good wild card pick, despite what we've seen on Twitter so far.
Yeah, I do think that's going to get split.
Yeah, I think that's a good candidate. So until y'all got here, West Virginia was definitely out on an island by themselves, and a contrived rivalry that I kind of alluded to earlier, the Riot Bowl, sort of emerged between West Virginia and Iowa State. They play for a gas can. It's not an actual trophy, but their fans kind of just made it a fun deal, and so this is a fun Big 12 tidbit. West Virginia Stadium was built like a year or two after Iowa State's, and they're the exact same stadium design, like same architecture firm, all that good stuff.
Nice.
So
That's awesome.
I don't think those fan bases actually dislike each other. I think they kind of like pretend to during the Riot Bowl, and they actually teamed up this year because Iowa State doesn't have baseball, West Virginia doesn't have softball, and so they formed kind of an alliance during baseball and softball season. But anyway, all that to say, y'all are kind of like stuck in the middle of them, and at least in terms of like schools further up north, kind of in the Midwest area, I could maybe see something like the Riot Bowl developing with Cincinnati and Iowa State, especially if there's some, shared recruiting battlegrounds in Illinois or something. I think both teams probably play in that region a little bit. So I think that's a good kind of secondary rivalry candidate for y'all.
I do think I see one developing actually in basketball too, but this is all predicated on the assumption that Wes Miller is going to absolutely knock it out of the park, and that's Kansas.
Oh, Jesus.
I want to hate Kansas so bad in basketball, and I'm ready to walk in there and just beat the shit out of them. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on here, but whatever. I want to beat Kansas every year. Bill Self, let's expose him for the cheater that he is, and let's take him down.
What's happening right now? A wise philosopher, Omar, once said, "Come at the king, you best not miss."
Oh, come on, Wes. We're fired up.
I love that. And Kansas basketball fans are a different breed. Now, Kansas fans are funny because, like, they'll start a campaign for their quarterback. They'll start like a Jalen Daniels for Heisman campaign, but they'll misspell his first name. And so they're clueless in football. They have no idea. But in basketball, at any opportunity, they'll remind you that, like, they're the mecca of college basketball. And they're, like, punching down at us. I'm like, we're Texas Tech. Like, you think we need a reminder from Kansas that, like, you'll have the upper hand in basketball? Like, just let us have one good season. We made a Final Four run. We won the Big 12 once in that stretch where Kansas won, like, 40 in a row or whatever. And they're just, like, so quick to be like, remember your place type stuff. I'm like, we know. Like, y'all are Kansas. We're Texas Tech. we get it, but like their fans are not terribly secure in that. It doesn't seem.
We have a lot of bravado in basketball. Like I think we're probably going to get on people's nerves in basketball. I think that
100%.
we tend to think of ourselves in a class that we haven't been in a long time, but we know we're there and we know we're going to get back there. It's just a matter of time.
Like we're going to pull stats from the 60s. Like it's going to happen. Like Kansas, we have more consecutive Final Four appearances than you. Like that's just a fact. And we also did it during the John Wooden era of basketball. Like we did do it. You guys didn't. You might have invented basketball, but you haven't been to more consecutive Final Fours than the University of Cincinnati.
Has Kansas ever gone back to back?
I don't know that much about Kansas history except that they don't have more consecutive Final Fours.
Since he did go back to back, correct?
That is true.
Yes.
So y'all, that's another feather in your cap if you want to use it.
Big time.
I'm not going to argue with Kansas basketball fans on Twitter, but if y'all want to use that, feel free.
Yep.
I'm going to wait till we actually have some recent success to really, really try to flex those muscles. But that's why I'm just dying for Wes Miller. I said this to Coomer a while back. There's probably tape of it somewhere. I was like, if we get into the Big 12, UC basketball can be put back onto the map. And this is a lot here needs to happen for this. But Cincinnati put us in a national championship game in basketball, and we are back, baby. Like we have the history. If you go back throughout, the 60s, the 90s, whatnot, and Final Four appearances, national championships, to get back to being what we all consider ourselves as fans at University of Cincinnati as Blue Bloods. We're not there, but a national championship, some runs like Houston's going on right now, and I think we would start being in that conversation again because we have that historical presence in basketball. So we will become the most annoying fans on Twitter if any of that happens.
Well, and I'm glad y'all bring a full complement of sports because, as you know, Central Florida doesn't play basketball, and this is a big basketball conference. So I'm glad y'all are bringing both football and basketball to the Big 12.
God, I love it.
I love you.
I feel like you just answered this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What sport do you feel will be the closest to competing for a conference title this upcoming season?
Well, after the arrival of Aziz Bendago, it's no doubt going to be basketball.
Okay.
We're going to surprise people.
All right. Top 3 restaurants, bars, breweries that we should visit in Cincinnati.
Ooh.
Bars and breweries. Okay. Wow. Interesting. So first, I'm going to point people to the Catskeller Social Club Discord, where we have a beer and booze Discord channel for a lot of great recommendations. We actually partner with a couple other podcasts, Go Beer Cats, Viva La Cats, but the Beer Cats podcast kind of specializes in that beer niche. So we have been learning more and more. Let's think. For the bar I want to start with is Murphy's. I want to start with Murphy's Pub in Clifton. It's hole in the wall. It's South Clifton, kind of off on its own island. But when Hummer and I attended senior night, the last game before COVID, we beat Temple on senior night. It was the last hurrah for Jaron Cumberland, Trayvon Scott, and we celebrated by going to Murphy's, playing Papa Shot. But beyond that, just really affordable drinks, great vibe. It's to me the best bar in Clifton by a lot. So Murphy's Pub is a must-see or must-visit. Hummer, what brewery would you start with?
Well, I was going to give a little backstory there. For that game, we're sitting there watching it. I think I got threatened to get kicked out of the game by an usher for screaming too hard. But I looked at Coomer like, if we went on a last-second shot, you're not going home right away. And that's what happened. We went on a last-second shot. So Coomer had to go out and get wasted with us. So that was fun. I mean, I'm going to probably – the breweries scene, it's awesome in Cincinnati. You really can't go wrong. But if you're going to go to, in my opinion, I guess maybe to some of the OG, the classics, like I really like going to Mad Tree. I think the vibe there is good. It's a nice big open space. But this is how long I've been out of the game.
Yeah, let me answer this one because there's an obvious answer that we need to start with. You need to go to Rheingeist and you need to grab yourself a Cincy.
Mad Tree over Rheingeist.
No, you need to grab Jesus. You need to grab yourself a Cincy Light beer and support the Bearcats NIL Collective. For the love of God, Hummer, stop discouraging people from going to Rheingeist. Rheingeist is downtown Cincinnati. It's got ping pong, cornhole, great space, fun environment. Look, some different opinions on the beer.
Buy the 12-pack of Cincy Light. That's what you buy the 12-pack.
Yeah, you buy the 12-pack of Cincy Light, no doubt. But if you like IPAs, their Truth IPA is fantastic. It's the biggest brewery in Cincinnati as well. I would recommend checking it out, and it has nothing to do with the fact that they are now going to be funding our NIL collective to an extent.
Did you guys get jobs after Tuberville encouraged you to? Did we both get jobs? I think we've covered that you both have jobs now.
We're employed, gainfully employed, thankfully. But I wasn't until Tuberville said something, and it was then that I realized I needed to get a goddamn job.
I thought about quitting mine. It was tough though, Yeah.
I think we covered the rest of the answers in our journey tonight. So
look at us.
Well, I was gonna say you said 3, I think you said, and there's a place for the bars and restaurants. There's a place that is also near and dear to my heart that I love. It's nothing special. It's another hole in the wall, but it's on campus, and it's Martino's. Martino's in Vine. I personally think that they have some of the best cheese and bacon fries, but also pizza fries, I think they call them. But then they have a buffalo chicken wrap, and then they do like pitchers of beer for nothing if you're employed. They cost nothing if you're employed. Like they're so cheap. Sometimes they ID you, sometimes they don't, but that place is incredible.
Rob, I've got some lightning round prop bets since we are a gambling podcast just for fun. But before we do that, is there anything y'all want to know about Texas Tech and our fans, our football program that would be of any use to Cincinnati fans?
I kind of want to get an idea from you two what the expectations look like from your perspective. Is this a season where you've got high hopes, lots of returning players? What's the situation right now with where you are with football?
I think Texas Tech is going to be really good in 2 years, but I think of roster makeup and super seniors and returning talent. They have a chance to be good this year. You'll take a dip next year, but I really do feel like if everything goes right, Texas Tech could compete for a Big 12 title. Now, there's a lot of ifs, and they all have to go right. But returning quarterback, returning running backs, returning wide receivers, returning offensive line, returning defensive line except for Tyree Wilson, returning defensive backs. I mean, you're pretty much returning everybody. Except for maybe your best player. So I feel good about this season. Again, it all has to go right, but certainly as good as last year is the expectation.
Yeah, you're going to be really old for one more season. I think both starting corners, super seniors, like we said, both starting interior defensive linemen, super seniors, both safeties, super seniors. And then, as Rob alluded to, you've got some age and starts on the offensive line.
Finally.
A 4th or 5th year quarterback now. I think 5th year quarterback, Tyler Shuck, transfer from Oregon. He was behind Herbert. Then 1 year as a starter at Oregon, coming into year 3 at Texas Tech. So, yeah, 2024, there'll be kind of a reset, and that's where some of this freshman and sophomore talent right now, it'll be a matter of how well do you develop that. But I think this year's team should be, I think, comparable to last year's, which was 8-5 with a bowl win. None of the losses were really too bad. Baylor got out of hand late, but you were a tough out even in a loss, and you weren't good enough to really blow anybody out too badly. I think West Virginia was really the only one in the Power 5 at least that you were kind of able to pull away significantly. So, yeah, I think 8 wins-ish is a fair expectation, and 8 wins can look different. Like, there are some good teams that win 8 games. There are some not so good teams that win 8 games with a soft schedule or just some lucky breaks. But that's about where I expect us this year. And like Rob said, if you do get a couple breaks and that 8-ish turns to 9 or 10, you could be playing for a Big 12 title. Or if it goes poorly, it could be 7 wins, and people will be a little bit disappointed by that. But I think that ballpark is about right.
Do you have a song? Do you have a song that plays in your stadium every game, like a song that Texas Tech is known for in the football stadium?
No, and we have one that they should play. Of course, you have the band that plays some songs. They should play Red Raider Coming at You. But you don't have like a Mr. Brightside or anything like that.
this has actually been an issue for the past few years. We've been to some away games, and the PA system, like the guy who manages the music at the away games, does a better job of like kind of taking the temperature of the room and understanding like what would be a good song to play right now. It's a lot of like boomer 80s rock, and it's like Don't Stop Believing isn't going to get the student section going right now, and like it's a key third down, and so there are some other student sections, other stadiums that do it better. I think that they're listening though to ideas on how to improve that, but yeah, we don't have a signature song or anything like that. I wish we did, because I think stuff like that has sort of been lacking in terms of a stadium experience.
That reminds you describing the vibe and the music they're playing and just not really having a finger on the pulse. I attended the Arkansas game last season with Hummer's brother, actually, and a couple other guys, and real excited for it. I typically love going to SEC games and seeing the vibe and the culture around these different football programs. And they've got the Woo Pig, which they do however many times throughout a game, which definitely wears on you, especially as you're losing throughout. But I swear the music selection in that stadium is the worst I've ever heard. I could not believe. I wish I had more anecdotal evidence of like what songs were being played. I just remember thinking, like, 12, 13 beers deep, what is happening right now? Why are they playing these songs? Yeah. Nobody is feeling it. People are sitting on their hands until the Woo Pig happens again. That's the way they rally everybody, was the Woo Pig. But good Lord, Arkansas, the music.
So Rob and I went to the TCU game last year, which was in Fort Worth, and it's one of the smaller stadiums capacity-wise in the Big 12, but they did a really, really good job getting their student section involved and keeping them involved. And like they had to kind of coach them through it, but they had a guy basically with like his own microphone and speaker in the student section, and he would say stuff like, "Okay, students, it's third down, like get loud," and they would. And so like they were very responsive, and it was it was scripted, but it worked. Like it kept them engaged, and they did some goofy stuff. I guess every stadium does. Like they did a really cringe sing along, and they've got these guys that wear like purple overalls, and it was weird, but the rest of it was pretty good. They have like this Hypno-Toad video, and I don't understand the Hypno-Toad thing.
I don't either, but I love it.
But they go crazy for it, and so it worked. And
TCU also have the riff ram boo paw zippity zippity.
Yeah, their chant is kind of weird too.
But Texas Tech, I wouldn't say has anything like that. They have the swag surf. That's mostly in basketball. A lot of teams do the swag surf, but I think Texas Tech does it the best. But the football stadium, we throw tortillas at the beginning. That's just the opening kickoff. Unless you bring extra tortillas, then it's the opening.
I'm here for tortilla throwing.
Yeah.
Maybe the Texas game, you bring a couple of extras, and it's the third and fourth touchdown too. But if you score that many, but the tortilla thing is pretty much the iconic Jones moment. There's not a Mr. Brightside or John Denver kind of moment.
We do have one of the cooler entrances in college football, and I say that unbiasedly. It's a live mascot. We call it the Masked Rider, and it basically looks like Zorro on a jet black horse. And it, we fire off a couple shotguns, and it, runs through the smoke. Now, last year's horse was kind of skittish, and so it was less majestic than in years past because he would kind of like
more of a gallop.
Yeah, he'd kind of like scamper a little bit.
Yeah,
I like the idea of the fans in the stands. This horse, little off.
Centennial champion.
It'll replace this horse.
Yeah.
People, how stupid college sports can be, and like how trying to explain a tradition to somebody outside your fan base, they're like, that's so weird. But when they retired the old horse, like I definitely teared up a little bit, and like its last run was majestic. It was beautiful. Describing it to somebody who's never seen it, they're like, "You cried over a horse?" I'm like, "Yeah, I kind of did a little bit, like just barely." And then they bring the new horse out, and you're like, "Oh, this horse is a little bit wimpy and just frightened."
Yeah.
You know what though? He'll grow on you. That horse will grow on you.
No doubt.
So. He's going to step up every season a little bit. Add something to his game every year.
No, I would like text my wife updates from the stadium on how the horse did I was like, "Hey, it looked better this time. Like it's getting more comfortable." Or like one time it like refused to run. I was like, "No good today." So anyway, we're working through that. But that's probably one of our cooler stadium atmosphere kind of traditions, just the run out with the horse and everything.
Very cool.
Unfortunately, we don't get the run. They don't do a run out with the Bearcat.
Yeah.
Bearcats are a real thing, and their pee smells like popcorn.
I thought they smelled like popcorn. Like just
do they smell it or just their
yeah.
pee? I like the idea that just their pee does. How do you guys know that?
Oh my God!
All right, you want to do some prop bets real quick?
Let's do prop bets.
Let's do it.
Okay, something I've been impressed with going back to the Luke Fickell era and Scott Satterfield. Cincinnati's recruited at a really high level. I think Cincinnati and Texas Tech right now are both hovering in the 20s in terms of recruiting class rankings. Where will they finish? Let's say over under 25.5 nationally. Do y'all think he beats that?
I'm going to take the over. I think we're going to finish just outside of that. I'd probably predict low 30s.
I'm going to take the over there.
Hope I'm wrong.
And that's where like the really good Oklahoma State and TCU teams and Baylor over the last decade or so in the Big 12. Of course, nobody's going to out-recruit Texas or OU, but if you can live in that upper 20s, lower 30s and stack classes like that, those teams have won 10, 11 games in the Big 12. So I think Cincinnati can do really well for themselves recruiting.
Frankly, he's outperformed that so far. And so if he just continues on the current trajectory, it would go under. I think I'm just being, I won't even call it a realist, just maybe a hater. I might be being a hater.
Tempering expectations.
Yeah, I mean, we are currently ranked ahead of Wisconsin, which is fun. I would love to see that trend continue because the rumor is that Luke Fickell did not think he could recruit in the new environment. He wanted to be old school and not have to deal with NIL. That's the rumor. And Cincinnati's like, oh, screw that. We're getting on that train.
And Wisconsin will not.
Good for them.
Yeah. Hey, good luck, Wisconsin.
Will Cincinnati play for a Big 12 championship in football in the next 4 years?
I mean, you got to take yes on that. I mean, I can't go in here and be so negative Nancy, but I think we at least have the recruiting infrastructure to get us the talent to do it. So I would take that as a yes on that prop bet.
Brady Drogosh, of House Targaryen, he's going to lead us there. So yes.
Okay. Will Nippert Stadium be at or over capacity every game this season?
Yes.
Yes.
Over every game.
I think so too. Like I said, I was looking at it with the American schedule, and I think y'all would agree the Big 12 schedule is certainly more compelling, and y'all were pretty much right at 40,000, maybe a hair under. But if y'all have teams like Oklahoma State, BYU, whoever coming in instead, I think it'll be a sellout every. And that's where, again, these fans at Texas Tech that are like poo-pooing Houston and Cincinnati or whatever, it's like, yeah, their stadium is a little smaller, but they're selling it out, and that's more than we can say for ourselves sometimes. And so I respect that, and I agree. I think Cincinnati will sell out every game this year.
I'll point it out, too. This is going to be, I think, in my mind, a help for this cause. We do have a pro football team, Cincinnati, the Bengals, and they are really good right now. And so ticket prices for the Bengals are incredibly high. Yeah. It's a lot more affordable for a lot of people to go to the UC football games. And so I think you're just going to see more people opting if they're going to do one or the other. They're opting for UC football because it's less expensive. They can bring the whole family down, and it's still a relatively family-friendly environment. You'll see kids. You're not going to see necessarily infants, but you'll see younger kids. Where at Bengals games, you don't want to bring your kids there. That's a terrible environment for a child.
Yeah. Well, and if children witness that too early on, they're just going to, especially if it's Bengals Chiefs, they're just going to become Mahomes fans for the rest of their lives.
Stop. Stop. Bengals have one of the coolest teams in the NFL.
Yeah, I was about to say, if anybody's keeping with their quarterback, it's the Bengals fans.
I can't help myself. Sorry.
Joe Cool's pretty cool.
Hey, don't make us go get the LSU fans on you.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
Gonna hit the gritty on us.
We took a look a couple weeks ago at every Big 12 team's season win total over under, and just sort of had a gut reaction. I think we'll have a more solid prediction maybe come August, a little bit closer to the season. Cincinnati's at most books looks like it's 5.5. I think we kind of touched on this earlier, but over under 5.5. Do y'all think this year for Cincinnati wins?
Is this for total wins or just league
Total.
wins?
Total.
Over.
I think it's tough because the first line I saw was 4.5, and I thought that was kind of a slam dunk. There's 3 layup wins on the schedule. There's 2 more in there easily. 5.5, a little more intriguing, but I think we're going to be bowl eligible. We'll get to 6.
Okay.
East Carolina, done. Pittsburgh, done. Miami,
Eastern Kentucky, not East Carolina. We're leaving that behind.
Eastern Kentucky. Coomer, do we play? Well, Coomer voted on something. Kentucky twice, right?
Let's not talk about that.
So that's 3 right off the bat. I think we can come in there. We're going to wipe Houston, the floor with Houston. That's just how it works. I know it's always scary to say Kansas is clean up, especially if you're a Texas fan. But I think Kansas is one that we can come in and steal that victory. And Iowa State, I got no respect for you. We're coming in there and cleaning the
Shots
floor with you
fired. Riot Bowl 2.0. I love it. Okay, so how about phrased a different way? If I guaranteed you 6-6 and a bowl game in your first year in the Big 12, are you taking that or rolling the dice on potentially doing better, but also potentially missing a bowl game your first year in the Big 12?
Rolling the dice.
I'm taking it.
Interesting.
You're taking it? Oh,
taking it.
such a Jesus, grow a pair. What are you talking about? Like, I'm just gonna take mediocrity as my happy place. No, like at the end of the day, like just moving to a Power 12, I don't think we should have UC fans in particular, any school should be like, I'm just happy to be here. No, we want to be successful.
We're just laying a foundation. This year we're just laying a foundation.
I'm gonna roll the dice and say, let's go, baby. You're at that 6 wins total. You guys mentioned it before. A couple other games go your way. Next thing you know, you're sitting at 8 wins. Maybe you're knocking on the door to play something better.
I love and respect and appreciate that mentality. I've also seen first-year coaches and first-year conference realignment transitions go horribly wrong for some teams. And so I see both sides of it for sure.
Like, I understand that side too. And if that happens, then so be it. That's why I'd rather take the gamble instead of the guarantee.
You've also had teams come in and be immediately successful, like TCU, who's really good their first year and then kind of went down and then came back up and then went down and then came back up. That's been their MO in the Big 12, but it could happen early with Corleone.
Corleone, man. Carried by a DT.
Hey, I'm a big fan.
So here's what I'll leave y'all with. I'll leave y'all with this parting thought. Jalen Hutchings, the defensive tackle that I mentioned at Texas Tech, played a little bit of running back in high school, and his huddle film is online. It's incredible. It's 280-pound man just running for 40 yards. They gave him the ball on the goal line last year, and he scored a touchdown. It was awesome. And so if y'all have any sort of line to the Cincinnati offensive coordinator and can get them to hand the ball off to Corleone at the 1-yard line, we would love to see that.
Okay. I'm making a note and we'll pitch them. We've got that connect.
Awesome. Well, Rob, any final thoughts?
You said it all, Coach.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for coming on the podcast. We're excited to have Cincinnati in the Big 12 and a little bit disappointed we don't get to play this year because I think Nippert is on our bucket list of away games, and y'all seem like a fun fan base to tailgate with and party with. So we will cross paths eventually. We look forward to that day. But until then, best of luck in your first season, and I guess we'll see you on Twitter and stuff throughout the off season.
We will.
We don't sleep
enjoy
on the
work,
arena.
fellas.
Don't sleep on Fifth Third Arena, man. It's another fun venue to watch a sporting event.
I heard y'all are gonna stomp Kansas there this year, so I'm not sleeping on anything. Don't worry.
We're gonna wipe the floor.
I did not have that on my bingo card. Calling out Kansas.
Hey, I said I want that to be our rival. Like that's aspirational.
Yeah, I don't think that's what you said.
Awesome. Well, we enjoyed it, guys. Thanks so much for coming on, and good luck this year.
Appreciate it, fellas.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Take care.